To all of you who are visiting today, who may be returning home from college or back home visiting your parents, to those who live here and our parishioners here, and to anyone who just driving through Mayfair this morning thought, oh, why not just pop in? A warm welcome to all of you and a very Merry Christmas. Here in Chicago, we don't have just one cardinal. We actually have about 6 other bishops, 8 if you count the retired guys. And one of our bishops is Bishop Manns. He's one of the auxiliary bishops here in Chicago. And he's a wonderful man and a great bishop. And one of the many things that make him a great bishop is how down to earth he is. Bishop Manns really doesn't like much of the pomp and circumstance that comes with being a bishop, and he tries to avoid it at all costs. A friend of mine in the seminary a few years ago, he was at a parish that Bishop Manns was at, and he had never met him before. So someone from the parish had told him that the bishop was in the sacristy preparing for Mass and that he should go in and introduce himself. So he got into the sacristy, found no one there, and he waited. Eventually, he hears the toilet flush, and out comes this big guy in a white t-shirt, and he's drying his hands. Now, my friend assumes, based on his appearance, that he must be the maintenance man. And so he politely says hello without giving much attention to him. So then the man comes up to him, says hello back, and then introduces himself as Bishop Manns. Well, my friend was shocked and quickly offered much more of his attention. Often, the idea that we have of another person affects how we relate to that person. The way that we treat someone who gives us $1 million compared to someone who steals from our bank account is vastly different. Our idea of someone affects how we interact with them. My friend was polite when he thought Bishop Manns was a janitor, but when he found out he's a bishop, something changed. This isn't necessarily in and of itself a good or bad thing. It's just human nature. And so what is our idea of God? What do we think God is like? God is the origin and end of all things. We were created by God to live in communion with Him. And it's in God that we find true joy and happiness. We were created to be in a relationship with God. Now, the quality of that relationship depends on what we think God is like. Someone who doesn't believe in God at all will have no relationship with Him. Someone who thinks God is an angry, intolerant tyrant will have a very fearful and unstable relationship with Him. Someone who thinks God is a distant and impersonal force will have a very cold and distant relationship with Him. God became a human being because He wanted to correct our mistaken ideas about what He is like. God wants us to have a right idea about Him, so that we can live in a right relationship with Him. And so what's the right idea? Well, look at the baby Jesus. Wrapped in swaddling clothes, laid in a manger, smiling helplessly at His mother Mary. That is the true God. A God who comes to meet us right where we're at. Now, God meets us where we're at, but He doesn't want to leave us there. He comes into our lives in order to invite us to come into his life, to follow him all the way to heaven. He is so eager for us to let him into our lives so that he can let us into his life. God is all-powerful and all-knowing. He could have come to us in any way he wanted, but he chose to do so quietly as a poor, homeless infant laid in an animal trough. God came as a small, weak, and helpless child so he could draw us toward himself and restore our broken and or weak relationship with him. We're surrounded by distorted ideas of God, and unless we put a good filter in place, these distorted ideas will seep into our minds and interfere with our relationship with God, the one relationship that makes or breaks our happiness. And that filter comes from taking the initiative to fill our minds with robust, vibrant, and right ideas about God. And we can do this in 3 ways. The first is to spend about 10 minutes each day in personal prayer. It doesn't have to be 10. If you got 5, do 5 minutes. If you got 15, do 15. But to spend a set amount of time each day in prayer. The second is spending another amount of time, as long or as short as you like, doing some kind of spiritual reading. And the third is coming to the Eucharist. Receiving the Eucharist is the best way to focus on rebuilding and or maintaining the relationship with God that we either have or that we're working on. When it comes to praying, whatever amount of time you can give a day, hopefully 5 to 10 minutes, there is no shortage of prayer books, devotions, apps that can help you pray. Don't worry about having the right words. There are plenty of saints and theologians who have written those words that we can use. But of course, it's always welcome to pray from your heart. And in terms of spiritual reading, today after Mass, each family will receive a book that you can start reading today or tomorrow as you relax from all the parties and festivities. Today, let's thank Jesus for being a God who meets us where we're at. And let's show our gratitude by promising to let him take us a few steps closer to where he's at, through daily prayer, through spiritual reading, and most importantly, through the Eucharist.